Hello again everyone, welcome back to another episode of Final Fantasy Brave Exvius. My name is Mars, and today we're going to be talking about CG Cid. And now, in this video, I'm not really going to talk about how to use the unit or how to build the unit in like super specific detail, because I feel like other people have covered that very well. What I want to talk about that is actually Cid's most complex feature is the team that you surround him with. So today we're going to talk about Cid, how to fit him into your parties, and what sort of synergies work really well for this unit. Because, as you know, Cid fills a finishing role. Now, he can either do this through his jumps or his limit burst, both of which are extremely powerful and provide a lot of utility to your team. And I do want to talk a little bit briefly about the gear, because I know people are going to ask me, they're like, oh, is it better to do this or better to do this? Let's give you a couple of rules to go by when gearing, because what you gear him with is going to be largely dependent on what you have available. For maximizing jump damage, you want things that increase his jump damage modifiers, such as the Stas Spear, AD Kane's STMR, you want the Flapping Wings, you want Wind Veritas' TMR, you want Roberta's STMR. Those sort of things all together are what are going to impact his damage the most. And I know a lot of people are saying, oh, what about the Dragoon Gauntlet instead of a Flapping Wings? Well, when you factor in buffs and true double hand bonuses by having some attack on the wings, it actually does give you a little bit more damage to go with the Flapping Wings over something else like the Dragoon Gauntlet. So, but the Dragoon Gauntlet, of course, works if that's what you've got. Like, and that's the thing that I found, is that a lot of these are so close in terms of like, well, you could do this build or you could do this build, and both of them will give you a tremendous amount of damage. Go with whatever you have. Don't kill yourself over this. Now, if you do plan on using him as an LB finisher, then you do want to use elemental two-handed weapons, because then you don't have to have an external imbuer to maximize your damage. If you don't have, of course, the problem is that both of the elemental two-handed spears that we have are STMRs, so the odds of you having one aren't super high, and the off chance that you do have one, they're great. If not, go for any other two-handed spear that you might have, such as Stas Spear or Zodiac Spear, and if you have neither of those, use your best elemental spear for that particular fight. Go for a double hand build. If you happen to have stuff like Squall's STMR that boost LB damage, that's also a good pick to go for as well. So that's the sort of guidelines I would give on builds. I don't want to give anything too specific, because it's all just going to depend on what you have available, and at the end of the day, if you find that Cid is too difficult for you to build, just get a Cid friend. That's the beauty of Cid, is that you don't actually have to have one of your own. Now, let's talk a little bit about what his use actually looks like. He is definitely, in my opinion, one of the simplest units in the entire game to use, because you're either using him for jumps, or you're using him for his limit burst to finish chains, or as solo damage if the content is actually easy enough for that. In this case, if we're looking at jumps, the best way to maximize his damage is to do his cooldown skill, and then do his Spine Shatter's Dive 0 or whatever it's called, come back down the next turn, and then he's basically got 2 turns to do whatever he wants until his cooldown skill comes back. You can choose to do some of his utility jumps, you can do a limit burst if you've got it available, you can do whatever you want. Those 2 turns waiting for his cooldown skill to come back up are free turns to use however you want. Now, with his limit burst finishing option, you're basically just waiting to get his limit burst, and one of the things I would definitely recommend is pairing him with an Entruster, because his limit burst does not fill quickly and he doesn't have a whole lot to help it. So, and especially if you're using him as a solo damage dealer, you may be sitting around for a long time. So if you want to use him as an LB finisher, great, he's perfect for it. He may just need a little bit of support to help get that LB off the ground. So LB finishing, I think, is simple enough, but if we're talking about jumps are something that people don't know very much about, and just real simply, real shortly, you want to maximize your jump damage modifier, which is why Arenea's TMR is the best item you can equip on Cid for jump damage, because it increases all of his jump damage by 100%. That's like equipping a 100% killer to him. Now, of course, the problem you're going to run into with that is that you don't have an elemental imbue or imperil attached with that, and Cid cannot imbue himself. So what we want to do is jump into some of the party synergies that you can build that can allow you to maximize your damage, because when you combine the Stas Spear jump modifier, if you combine the damage variance that comes with it being a two-handed spear, and you combine an imbue, and you combine an imperil, Cid can do a disgusting amount of damage. Like, it's insanity to me. So we're going to look at some of the imbue options that you have and units that combine well with it, especially from the chaining front, because what you can do is you can make a slot efficient party that allows you to get a lot of value out of Cid without having to sacrifice too many party slots to do it. So first off, we're going to look at fire. Fire is definitely one of the most flexible elements because we have a couple of sources of imbue through Ignis or Ignacio, as well as the Craftsman's Secret Book or whatever the heck it's called. It's Varun's TMR. And we also have a trial reward item from the Bomb Family Fiesta, whatever the heck that fight was called. They can give you a materia that allows you to imbue yourself with fire as well. So you do have some strong imbuing options. Now, as far as who your good imperilers / chainers are, so that you can kind of roll them all into one, I personally like Yoon if I'm doing solo damage, because Yoon has a 100% imperil that you can use as a cooldown skill. Other units like Reagan or CG Laswell, they have 100% imperils attached. Units like Aron are really nice as well because they can combine AT frame chaining with a fire imperil or with a fire chain, and then you can use another unit to chain with him so that you can be a little bit more slot efficient, because he can be your breaker, and he can be your imperiler, and he can be your chainer. So overall, good synergy there. I think fire is one of the stronger elements to consider when building Cid. There are a lot of options for that. Now, Ice is the next damage type up in the list. Ignis, once again, is going to shine as an option there because he can imbue Cid, and he can also imbue somebody else if you want to multicast it. And then Christine also has an AoE Ice Imbue on her Limit Burst, so this is super handy if you have multiple units who can benefit from an imbue all at once, and she can apply it relatively easily because her Limit Burst is not too difficult to fill. Now, the nice thing is that she is a really good synergy option for the chaining option as well. So if you're using her paired with White Knight Noel, you are able to give Ice Element to Cid and everyone else in your party, chain it up with Christine and White Knight Noel, and finish with Cid. It makes it a very efficient party because you basically have 3 characters that are able to cover your tanking and your damage all in those slots, and you're going to do better damage than if you took a tank and 2 chainers in most cases. Alternative options for chaining and imperiling would be Frevia. And I know that Elfrida doesn't really chain, but I was excited to have an opportunity to feature her. She's a pretty good option because of her casket ability. I can't remember what it's called. It's cooldown skill. Huge ice imperil. Really good to have on hand if you do need to go the ice route. Now, moving on to Thunder. Thunder is probably the second most favorite element because we do actually have a budget imbuer, and that comes in the form of Desh. Now, of course, Desh's ability does have an like a chance to backfire, which is too bad, but if you don't want to go that route, you can of course use CG Sakura, or you can use Ignis, or you can use Varun's TMR once again for the self-imbue. And I think Thunder is probably Cid's, probably, if not the most, it's one of the most preferred elements for him to be imbued with, because there are a lot of units that have strong Thunder imperils and also bring with them some chaining. So if you want to talk about some simple rotations or setups, you're looking at units like Jiraiya, Roberta, or Lauren. They can provide your Thunder imperils, and they can also do some chains for you. If you want to get extra cheeky, I think Barbaricia is one of the best units for this because she has a very big cooldown skill that can give 120% imperil to Thunder. Then you just combine her with White Knight Noel or Rem or another Tornado Chainer, and you've got chainers built in. She can fill a support role for you with some HP MP refresh. Good stuff all around. Another one that I thought was worth mentioning is if you want to use Knight Delita and Mark Ramza as your breaker and tank pair, they also have a chaining ability that is unique to the 2 of them that they could use if you wanted to. So you could jump Cid up after imbuing him. Knight Delita's Limit Burst applies a big ol' Thunder Imperil, and then when it's time for Cid to come down, those 2 can chain together and create the chain modifier that you need to maximize Cid's jump damage. So lots of fun to be had with Thunder. It's probably one of my favorites to use because of all of those options. Now, Water is another one that there are a lot of interesting options with, and it may not look like it at first, but we have 2 imbuers. We have Nickel and we have other Nickel. We have fully clothed Nickel and much less clothed Nickel. Whatever you want to call them, I don't care. Both of them have a single target water imbue that you can use on demand, which is super handy. Now, the other thing that's important to keep in mind is that they have Flood, which means that all you need is another person that can chain Flood with them, and they can be the chain that you need. This means you can effectively take 2 DPS slots, one reserved for Cid, and one reserved for the other Flood Chainer, and you don't have to sacrifice additional party slots to maximize your damage potential. Now, I would say that Seabreeze Darkfina is one of the best options for this because not only can she dual cast Flood, but she also can apply a 110% water imperil, which is huge. Now, alternatively, if you're going for like a 3 DPS party, you could run somebody like Titus or Jekt. Both of them have very high water imperils as part of their kit. And the other thing that is worth mentioning is that you can get Leviathan's Torrent ability, I believe it's called, which also chains with Flood, which means that you could literally use anybody to chain with Nickel to create that chain modifier for Cid to land on. And then you get the benefit of a elemental chain modifier, much easier to build, much easier to finish on. Of course, you want to make sure that you have a unit to provide a water imperil for you, which is why I would probably recommend Seabreeze Darkfina the most, because she does have a few support things that you can use as well. Now, as we start getting into some of the more obscure elements, we're going to start finding that there are not as many options for some of these other ones. The first 4 that we talked about, we had a lot of flexibility and a lot of things to choose from, but with Wind, the only way to imbue it on yourself is to use Varun's TMR, which is kind of a pain. It's going to cut into your jump damage a little bit, but if you did decide you wanted to do that, you could use Barbarecia again with the White Noel or Rem combo. Get some nice wind imperil, some wind damage in there. And of course, as with this one and with thunder damage, you can use a Spear STMR if you have it. The only thing that will happen if you do that is you'll cut into your damage total modifier a little bit. You'll lose that 100% from Arania's TMR. Now, it may be in your best interest to equip Cid with one of these elemental weapons so that it can make your party not have to deal with any imbuing, but we're talking about maximizing damage here. Now, speaking of obscure elements, we're looking at earth damage, and this is another one where the only way for him to imbue himself with it is with Varun's TMR. And the other handy thing is that, you know, if you do happen to need earth damage and you can imbue yourself with it, you can use Eileen and CG Cid as chaining partners, just for example. You could also use that lion tank dude, I forgot his name. He's super dapper looking. Also an option. But probably this is not a setup you're going to use. Now, if you really wanted to imbue light, because I feel like light has been a popular element in the past, and we have a lot of options for imperiling and chaining for it, the only option that you're going to have, as far as I can recall, is Rayjack. And Rayjack is kind of a meme. Pretty much nobody has him, and even fewer people actually use him. But if you do happen to have him, you do happen to use him, you do happen to need a light imbue on your Cid, he's the guy to go to, because there's nobody else. But that being said, we do have a lot of really strong light imperil options. With Aurora Faravia or Sephiroth, you can get 100% light imperils, which is really good. Light Veritas can counter with 100% imperils, so good options there. Now, the only element that Cid does not have as an option is Dark. We don't currently have any way that you can imbue Dark onto Cid. We do have a few characters who can give themselves Dark element, but Cid himself cannot use it. So, those are kind of the things that I think about when I am building a party around CG Cid. I want to think about, alright, who can help me maximize my damage? And this was ultimately why I was able to go into a fight like Odin 3 stars. Take my Cid, stack that dude with all of the jump damage gear that I can put my hands on, imbue, imperil, break, Cid on the boss, like game over. I think I did 250 million damage against Odin without a chain, which means that if I had chained, I could have gotten over 1 billion damage in a single turn against Odin 3 stars, which is crazy. Is Cid worth it? Is he worth pulling for? Is he worth investing in? Let's talk about that real quick. Right now he doesn't have any enhancements. Later he gets some enhancements that just make him silly powerful all over again. So good news is that he's very powerful now and even more powerful later. So worth it from an enhancements perspective because he never really goes out of style. He never stops being useful. Now, as far as how much of a level investment you're going to have to put into him, you pretty much have to get him to level 110. Otherwise, he's not real useful. I would not recommend keeping him at level 100. He's not going to do anything for you. Level 120 is where you get some additional limit burst damage percentage. So if you do decide to use him as your limit burst finisher, then that's what I would recommend you do, is get to 120. As far as the investment requirement for his limit burst, I would say that it's 100% optional. I found it more fun to use him as a jumper, and it's much easier to build him for extra jump damage because we have stuff like flapping wings that are easy to get, Wind Veritas' TMR, which is easy to get, like a lot of stuff that really facilitates easy jump damage. So for me, I don't plan on leveling his limit burst. I don't think most people should level his limit burst. It's not really going to make that big of a difference for you in the long run. Now, as far as his gear requirements go, they are definitely varied. I know one of the big things that will increase your damage is if you happen to have RNA as TMR. If you don't have it, then it's not the end of the world. You can still get a ton of value out of Cid. It's just going to be a little bit harder to reach some of those ridiculous numbers that you see people show off. So, definitely has some things that make him a little bit easier to build, such as like 200% true double hand with his own TMR equipped, I think is what it is, which is kind of insane. And then you can equip flapping wings, which are a 3-star base TMR, and then kind of go from there. And you do get quite a lot of value out of that. Now, if we're going to talk about the breadth of his use, he is very applicable to anything that can take physical damage, because in Final Fantasy Brave Exvius, damage per turn is irrelevant. Burst damage is king. If you have a unit that can do very high burst damage, they can help you get past a lot of fights that would otherwise give you trouble. And Cid honestly is the king of burst damage right now, which means that he's going to be able to dump on just about any fight that he rolls into. Of course, the asterisk that I put on this is that you don't actually have to own your own Cid to use him. That's the beautiful thing about Dragoons like Cid, is that he brings everything that you need to the table. The only thing that you need to bring to the table to help Cid reach his potential is maybe an Imbue, or an Imperil, or a Break, or a Chain modifier. Those are all things that you can bring yourself with budget units. So as far as whether or not you know, his breadth of use is super wide, but you don't actually have to own the unit. And I think that's one of the beautiful things about him, is they created a unit that is incredibly powerful, very, very good against most content in the game, and you don't actually have to have one of your own. You can get a friend Cid, and you can sit on most of the content in the game, no problem. So if people are asking like, oh, is it worth it to pull for him? Is it worth pulling on his banner? I will say his step-up banner is very nice. I really like the 12k step up. I hope they continue to do that. But if you're like, oh, I'm not sure, I'm looking forward to Axstar, or I'm waiting for Xenogears, or I'm waiting for something else, then don't be tempted by Cid. Anytime you see a strat that you want to replicate that uses Cid, just take a Cid friend. No need to feel like you're missing out, because you can get all of his benefit, and you can let somebody else do the investment. You can let somebody else do the investment for you. So that has been the complete guide for Cid. And as far as complete guides go, it's a little bit incomplete because I didn't talk about builds in too much detail because I don't really care about that. Let the calculator do that for you. You know, put the gear that you have in, tell it to calculate for jump damage or LB damage, and let it do the work for you. I shouldn't be the one nannying you on, you know, how do you build him or whatever. So I did mostly want to talk about the strategy of, you know, what team do you put him with? Is he worth investing in? Is he worth pulling for? I've had a ton of fun with him. His Tour of Destruction was just viscerally fun for me to play. I enjoyed that very, very much. Hopefully you did too. So that concludes the complete guide for Cid. Let me know in the comments down below who you would like to see in the next video, and that is where I will see everybody next time.